Hello friends, good afternoon. Welcome to the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 8th May 2018. So we'll hit off with the daily quote. The real difficulty is always in ourselves, not in our surroundings. That's what Sri Aurobindo has said. So the real difficulty is always in ourselves. That means we become what we think. If we think the situations are difficult, things are going to be difficult. So we have to take things in stride, so things get easier. About me, my name is Sagar B. Ashwath. I'm a tutor at Shiksha IAS Academy. I'm a faculty for Psychology, Indian Economy and Ethics. Right. So what's in store today? So the editorial part, we have the violent time. It's about the Shopian violence which is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. The speed of violence has increased in the recent days. So that's what it is about. And then there is this price freeze. It's about the oil prices which have been increasing over a period of time thanks to the international markets which are showing a recovery as compared to the 2013-14 prices, but what the OMCs, the oil marketing companies which are controlled by the government are doing, they are not increasing the prices since the last 15 days. So this might be due to the elections which are due in Karnataka, as well as the elections which are going to come in the future days. So this is like you're going back on the reforms you yourself brought. That is, the government is going back on the reforms it brought. So the government did not want to give subsidies in petrol and diesel. So it had aligned the prices of petrol and diesel to the market mechanism. That is, if the international prices change accordingly, the prices of petrol and diesel used to change. But now, despite the change or the rise in international oil prices, the prices of petrol and diesel have been kept on hold. Maybe there is a pressure on oil marketing companies. So you can read this, and the gist of it is what I said, and you can go through this editorial. And then we have where the law needs to change track. So this is about the railways. There was this recent incident where the bus was hit by the rail, a train on a railway track in UP, and many lives were lost, including the school children and the driver. So what does the Railway Act say about the compensation and liabilities, and do they have recourse to compensation in other ways as well? This will be probed into as we analyze this particular article. The thing is that many a time it so happens that the editorial part and the op-ed pages have a lot of data for you. It's just that you have to refine the data. You have to remove those points which are not important from the UPSC perspective. So those points are really not useful for you to include in the mains examination or from the prelims perspective. So that's what I do here, right? Remove those pointers which are not useful for you and include only those pointers and explain them in brief or elaborate on them, so that it will be useful for you for writing down or writing the answers. Okay, this is about the railways, and then you have this stop this job charade. So this is about being critical about the government, right? So it's written by Jairam Ramesh, again a Congress leader. So they are just saying that the jobs are not being created, but the government claims that a lot many jobs have been created, and some sections in the government are even claiming that job problem is not a problem at all. So those things will be looked into, why the data given by the government, especially the EPFO, is not a reliable source. So that will be looked into in this particular article. And then you have the problems with DNA registry. So this is about DNA profiling, the pitfalls of DNA profiling. So Yes, DNA profiling would be a good thing if it is used properly, the DNA database is used properly, and sufficient checks and balances are erected. If not, it would be counterproductive to citizens' privacy and other constitutional rights which are given by the Constitution to the citizenry. Okay, so on that note, we'll be starting with the first article, violent crime. So Shopian is a place in the southern part of Kashmir, here, the right dot. So it's kind of becoming a stronghold for militants in the recent days. So encounters have been carried out, and the recent encounter on Sunday has killed 5 militants. However, things did not stop there. The civilians took to streets, and protests followed. However, this was not restricted to just Shopian. It spread to 2 other regions around Shopian, right? So because of this, as the protest spread, the protesters started pelting stones towards the security forces, and the security forces were forced to retaliate, and the result was 5 civilians died and over 130 people were injured in the clashes. So the security forces' idea was that it was the thought process of the security forces that it was a strategy by the civilians to distract the security forces and cause the militants to escape. Right? This was what the security forces were thinking. So, keeping this thing aside, what can we conclude from the recent spate of violence which is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, especially around this area? So daily violence has become a new normal now, and militants and the security forces and the civilians are at loggerheads almost on a daily basis. So Shopian was once a relatively calm place, but now it has been transformed. It is becoming violent by the day. It also points to a fact that it is not something which is geographically restricted. That is, the militancy in Jammu and Kashmir is not something which is geographically restricted. It keeps on changing its geographies, right? So traditional military strongholds which were present here, Pulwama, Anantnag, Kulgam, these were the areas which were militant strongholds, and now it is shifting to here Shopian, right? So what does the official data say about the number of deaths which have happened over the years? So annually, starting from 1990 till almost 2006-7, there were thousands of deaths annually. So from 2007-8, we have seen a decline, and 2012 saw the least number of deaths with only 117. However, from 2013, they started to climb back again, and there was a sharp increase from 2016, right? Why? Because one militant called Guran Wani was killed, and several dozens of youth have taken up arms against the security forces. They have joined ranks of the militants. Why has this happened? Probably, see, the homegrown militancy is a reflection of alienation. It's just that these elements, or so as to say, these civilians who take up the arms and join the ranks of militants are feeling the alienation by the political establishments. So what is needed is a security strategy alongside a political outreach, right? There has to be some sort of political outreach, talking with the civilians, make streets more calmer, put down the militants, yes, but not at the cost of civilian lives, or for that matter, you have to keep the civilians out of the harm's way as much as possible. This was what was done in 2010, and you saw a dip in 2012. It came down to 117. Why did this happen? In 2010, a delegation was sent, multi-party delegation was sent to the state, and they discussed with the civilians as to what their problems were, and promises were made so that civilian deaths would not happen anymore, or it would be brought down significantly. So they were a group of interlocutors sent as well. It was led by Dilip Patgankar, if I'm not wrong, and recently an interlocutor was appointed. Where things went, I would say nothing materialized out of it. So what needs to be done? You must understand that the summer months are the ones which are completely utilized by the militants to cause disruption in the valley. So this is when most of the clashes happen. So to take care of the situation, an all-party delegation is in the offing, right? That's what the center has to do, right? So the next one is about the railway tracks, especially the unmanned railway tracks, where it is at the juncture where they are at the intersection of the roads, and people cross the railway lines. So why was it in news, or what was the need for this article at all? There was this accident where the rail crashed into a bus which was carrying school children, and there were a number of school children who were dead. This is not the first time, though. It has been happening across the country in different states, but this came to limelight just because the number of deaths and it was school children who were involved in this. What are the issues here? The issue is that whether the railway administration is mandated to man all its level crossings. That is one issue involved, and the second one is the liabilities involved. It is one thing to hold railways liable if the railways is on the erring side, that is, it is of negligence of the railway or your train driver to have caused the accident. Yes, the liabilities involved will be obviously brought into question from the railway side, but what if there was no wrongdoing from the train driver at all? So can you hold railways responsible for this? So to know about this, whether railways can be held responsible and whether there is a mandate at all for having men at all level crossings, I'll look into a case which was before the Supreme Court, right? Which was an appeal in the Supreme Court, and a judgment that followed by the Supreme Court would throw light on these particular issues. So in 1997, there was a Supreme Court judgment. The case was that of Union of India versus United India Insurance. So the case was about an accident which took place in Kerala. 40 passengers and a driver had died, and it was hit by a train at an unmanned level crossing. So cases were filed before the Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal, and compensation was claimed against the owner as well as the insurance company of the bus, as well as the Indian Railways. Look at this. You're claiming the compensation from the owner, from the insurance company, as well as the Indian Railways. So what did the tribunal do? The tribunal awarded the compensation against the owner only. So apart from this, the insurance company also was made to pay the compensation. However, the compensation was rather meager. That is to say, it was only 500 rupees per victim, and it was completely bound by the policy terms. So the policy taken by this owner only ensured that 500 rupees would be given to each victim. That was too less. So obviously, appeals were made in the High Court by the victims and their families, and the Railways too was made liable for the negligence of not making provisions for a gate and a personnel to mind the gate. So here it is. So the High Court, right, pointed out that it is mandatory for manning almost all the level crossings. So, however, is it essential to man all the level crossings, or is it only few? On that point, right, you have the Supreme Court talking about it, right? So the legal issues addressed by the Supreme Court are rather instructive for what the railways ought to do. What the Supreme Court says is the claim for damages for negligence contribute to tort action. What is a tort? A tort is a civil wrong that causes someone else to suffer loss or harm, resulting in legal liability for the person who commits the tortious act. The person who commits this act is called a tortfeasor. So it is of the nature of a civil wrong. Now, Supreme Court just looks into the Railways Act and sees what the Railway Act says in the first place. It does provide for a fixed compensation, and this fixed compensation will be decided by railway claims tribunals. These are present all across India. So different regions have different railway claims tribunals. And it goes ahead, the Railway Act says that only a passenger on the train can claim can make the claims, not other people, that is not the kith and kin. Passengers of the bus and motor vehicle, these people are not supposed to directly go to the Railway Claims Tribunal. Instead, they have to go to the Motor Accident Claims Tribunal. However, this tribunal, that is the Motor Accident Claims Tribunal, can entertain the claim against the railways as well. So, one is the compensation can be decided by the Railway Claims Tribunals. Two, Motor Accident Claims Tribunal also can decide the compensation. So, the Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal can decide on the compensation only if the negligence of the railways is established. In other cases, it is only the Railway Claims Tribunal. So keeping this Railways Act and the provisions therein in mind, the Supreme Court decided and gave the directives. So it made use of what is called as a neighborhood principle. It just said that it is the duty of the railways to take care of its neighbors. Who are these neighbors? So railways is a service, and wherever it has the infrastructure, whoever are close to this infrastructure are all neighbors, especially the uses of vehicles on the roads. So these are the neighbors we are talking about. So that's a common law liability for railway administration for an accident at an unmanned crossing should be a liability for the railways, and it recognizes railways as a dangerous operation, and hence it is bound to take care of the road users, right? So the second issue we were talking about, liabilities involved. Yes, railways will be liable even if it is even if it is unmanned or manned, it will be liable. Right? Railways should take all precautions that will reduce the danger to a minimum, and it must take into consideration if the traffic has been increasing. So if the traffic is increasing, it has to take additional measures so as to see that at these junctions accidents do not happen. So it gave a norm as such. If 75 to 100 vehicles cross the level crossing per day, the railway has a duty to care at a common law to provide a gate for the watchman. So this is the minimum. So 75 to 100 vehicles, right? Apart from this, what is required? You need to amend the law a bit, and there is a need for continuous audit. So traffic must be calibrated, adequate infrastructure must be built for those people who manage these gates, and safety measures should be put in place. The signals and all such things must be put in place by the railways. In every one of the major accidents in India from 2016 to 17, the families of the victims were contacted by the tribunals which were mentioned earlier, and applications for compensation were filed, and quick adjudication was done, and also the payments were made. However, what's the problem? The responses to claims for compensation arising out of the accidents have been on an ad hoc basis. It is completely on an ad hoc basis where, you have to go and you have to, apply for the compensation. If you don't apply, you don't get the, ex gratia payment. So, what needs to be included? Compensation should be on a proactive basis without driving the victims or the families to file the applications in tribunals. And also, going further, another change can be made. The ex gratia payments we are talking about, right, should be then substituted by rights-based compensation regimes. So this will sensitize the railways to administer their operations with greater focus on public safety, right? The next topic is stop this job charade. So this is quite funny because several claims have been made and all the claims come from the government quarters. Look at this. The Prime Minister says 7 million new jobs created in 2017. So obviously he based his rhetoric on the study by two economists. And then came the Minister of State for Civil Aviation. He says that 10 to 12 million young people join the workforce every year. Out of them, 7 million new jobs, new and formal jobs were created in 2017. So, if 7 million formal jobs were created, right? What are the formal jobs? Formal jobs are those jobs where the laws apply, that is to say Minimum Wages Act, the Companies Act, the Labour Act. So these acts apply, and the firms which are registered with the government, right, are all in the formal sector. So your agriculture is informal, and then you have the street vendors, they are informal jobs. So if 7 million jobs were created in 2017, obviously rest of the people, that is another 5 million people maybe, would have got the job in informal sector. This only implies that almost everyone got a job. Nobody went jobless in 2017. Great. And then the vice chair of Niti Aayog, right, he came out and said 6.22 million new jobs were created in 2017-18. And then the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council says 15 million new jobs were created. Look at this. You can see the contradiction all through, right? And all come from the government quarters. So, what is this all about? Why so many, interpretations, or so as to say, so much of data, and so much data which is not based on sound statistics. So, let's dig deeper, a bit deeper. Yet, given such rosy figures, yet the mood of the nation surveys, there are several surveys done by your Lokniti CS2S, India Today, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Several surveys have said that unemployment and jobs for youth are the biggest concerns of India. If these were true, these stats were true, this would not have been the case. The surveys would have shown a different pointed towards different directions per se. What are the data sources? The problem is with the data sources, if you ask me. And what are these problems? The Employee Provident Fund Organization, EPFO data under the data sets are not entirely reliable. They base their data on samples, and very few samples they take, and even the Niti Aayog has said that it is not reliable. So to draw a conclusion from unreliable data sets would drive people nuts. The government's economic survey of 2017-18 fiscal, on the other hand, says that job problem in India is rather grave. It says that 90% of all employees in the formal sector earn less than 15,000 a month. So a stark comparison can be drawn between those people in the formal sector and informal sector. If you are working under engineering scheme, you will be assured of 6,000 rupees per month. So this 15,000 rupees per month is the salary of a person who is a senior in the government offices. So 90% of such employees get only 15,000 per month. Going further, a new recruit would get somewhere around 7,500 being in a formal sector. So that's not much. So such jobs are not worth it according to what has been written in this article. So what is needed though? So we have to set the political differences aside, right? All the parties should set the political differences aside, and job problems is a serious issue and it has to be treated as such. So you have to accept the reality. Yes, the government would be shown in the bad light, but however, running away from such issues, that is the uncomfortable truths, is not the solution. Democracy works better when you entertain such debates on the contentious issues confronting the nation. That's what is to be done. It's a global issue. It's not something like which is haunting just India. It's a global issue, and all major economies today face the problem of job creation. So we are yet to bear the true impact of automation and other technological disruptions on job creation, whereby the machines take over the labor, right? And more people will be put out of job with automation and other technological advances we are making. So given the dangers that are in front of us, it's prudent for us not to just sideline the issue and make political statements to run away from the ground realities. So debate and discuss the ideas to find solutions. A true democracy should do it, and any true democracy would do it, right? Okay, next is the problems with DNA registry, right? The government has put out a draft proposal to come up with a DNA database. So this comes in the background of several crimes which have been increasing, especially against women. The National Crime Records Bureau says that only about a quarter of rape cases end up in conviction, right? So that's too less. That's way too less, right? So conviction rates are too low, right? So solution. What is the solution to this? The government thinks that making a sex offenders database or a DNA database of those people who have been accused would resolve the issue, would help you to nab the criminals at a faster pace. So in this regard, a draft bill has been developed, and the Andhra Pradesh government even has announced that it has signed up a private agency to collect the DNA from all its citizens. So what is the problem then? The problem is it throws in several problems, so as to speak. Based on the experience of other countries, what you can see as building such a database is not an easy task. It requires a lot of money, finances, infrastructure, not an easy thing to do. Expertise, right? Workforce, a skilled workforce. So all these are required. It's not an easy task. And also, you must bear in mind, it does not also always offer justice. That's the second problem. It is an ethical landmine of sorts. So it brings to the fore a lot of ethical issues. So this would be useful for your people for ethics, right? So what are the ethical issues involved in collecting a DNA? So that would be a good question. So what are the pitfalls of the technology? Yes, the DNA technology has advanced very well, and even the slightest of variations between the genetic material, right, can be distinguished by the latest technology. But the problem, however, is at the crime scenes there is a chance of planting others' DNA. This would only lead to wrong implication and miscarriage of justice. Someone who is innocent might as well be framed by fabricating the evidence, so as to say, planting others' DNA. DNA is something which is easily available. Why? Because everyone leaves traces of DNA, and this would only wrongly implicate, and miscarriage of justice would happen. So every day we walk around, and your traces of DNA will be there from the broken pieces of cells as well. So this is something which would be horrific if for a person who has been wrongly implicated. So this has to be kept in mind. So protecting innocent people's privacy and their civil liberties and rights are the main concerns. Yes. So this is in the this comes in the background, right? The Cambridge Analytica scandal, where most of the people's data was shared and it was misused without people knowing it. So this was, the social profiles. However, this is something which is a biological profile we are talking about. This can be misused to greater proportions, and the personal information, which is the DNA information, is highly personal, and they can be misused to a great extent. This can be seen as it has happened in various other countries. When DNA tests were initially used in several other countries, it was just meant to supplement other evidence. But the expansion of this technology to include other innocent people within the ambit only transgresses the constitutional rights, and this would be problematic for common citizens. The police sometimes use the DNA dragnets, whereby all the people in the community will be persuaded, right, to give their saliva samples or the blood samples to possibly, identify a possible suspect amongst them. These methods are simply an expansion of the stop and search approach, right? And this would be done to target particular groups, maybe on the basis of race, ethnicity, and class. And this is not something which has not happened earlier. An example can be seen here. It was reported in 2007 that close to 3/4 of young black men who were there in UK were on the DNA database. This is really, really astounding and terrifying. What protections can be offered if you want to go ahead with such a draft bill, right? If you want to make this an act, the government has to keep these things in mind. It is absolutely essential that the people from whom the DNA is being taken should be priorly informed that consent has to be taken, and it should not be taken rather surreptitiously. What is surreptitiously? In a rather crafty manner, right? In a manner that amounts to cheating, right? Or in a manner that is, so as to say, concealed, right? So the other person not knowing it, you should not do it in such a way. Secondly, a court order should be required for obtaining the DNA if the person is not giving his consent. The DNA should only be compared with the crime scene DNA for the suspect. It should not be compared with anything else. Thirdly, those who are cleared for a crime should not have their DNA information stored, and DNA gathered from offenders should be destroyed after the identification, so that such information is not used for profiling in the future. And finally, a court order should be necessary to access the medical records relating to genetic data. If these protections are given, then most of the concerns raised related to privacy, related to misuse, miscarriage of justice, these can be resolved
not 100%, however, to a great extent they can be resolved. Bear in mind, even if an offender gets away, an innocent person should not be framed, right? There's always a chance of finding the offender at a later date. However, there's no way you can get back those days of an innocent life, right? In other news, one important thing which was in news was that Rupee hit a 15-month low, which crossed 67 rupees per dollar. So it is a psychological barrier. 67 is a psychological barrier where the rupee should not be left to depreciate beyond 67. So this is because there has been a rising demand for US currency, especially from the importers of crude oil. The crude oil has been seeing a rise in its price over the last year or so, and it has only it has only quickened, the price rise has only quickened in the recent times. So rupees is the worst performer of all the Asian currencies. So it has lost almost 5.1% since January. So why the prices have been rising, right, in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so? One reason is Venezuela's deepening economic crisis. Because there would be an economic crisis, less oil production, looming decision on whether US will reimpose sanctions on Iran. If US reimposes sanctions on Iran, trading with Iran would become difficult. If trading with Iran becomes difficult, Iran is a large producer of oil. If trading becomes difficult with Iran, probably production has to be cut by Iran, also as to say there would be less supply in the market. So then why is it happening now? The decision is not yet taken. The thing is, if you expand your trade with Iran now, it would be difficult for you to roll back and find a new seller at that point in time. So countries are cautious to expand their business with Iran as of now. What about the India's case? The huge dollar demand from oil importing companies, right, has weighed heavily on the domestic currency, right? More the imports, more you have to pay in terms of dollars. The more you pay in terms of dollars, the more you have to earn. However, the problem is that rupee is depreciating. If the rupee is depreciating, it means for every dollar you have to pay up more number of rupees. For oil you pay in dollars. So for the same amount of oil you end up paying more rupees. So it is costlier. So oil prices are expected to go further up in the coming days, and this would only lead to fiscal deficit if the government does not see the fact that it should not roll back the reform process it had embarked on, whereby administered price mechanism was completely removed. If it rolls back on this reform, probably it would worsen the fiscal deficit and all the other problems related to fiscal deficit would step in, right? So that's about it for the day, guys. Thank you for watching and have a beautiful day. Remember, do like the video, right? So that would be really helpful for reaching out to more people, right? Thank you.